Excited for you to join us this morning for our presentation, Check Your Anchor, Revamping Student Staff Hiring Practices. And as Rachel said, my name is Kaila Kowalski. I'm an Assistant Director for Residence Life and Education at the University of Central Florida, and I oversee all of our professional and student staff recruitment within Residence Life.
And my name is Hailee Handel. I'm the Graduate Coordinator for Selection and Leadership. I solely oversee the Student Office Assistant hiring, and I assist with Kaila with all of our other student staff hiring at the University of Central Florida.
Yeah, so Hailee and I are going to talk to you a little bit today about some ways that we've revamped, kind of overhauled our processes the past few years. Hailee and I are the sole managers of the process, so we've done a lot of work along with our committee to kind of do some cool changes. So one thing we want to preface is that we will be trying to co-monitor the chat. So feel free to pop something in the chat. We may not see the direct messages depending on who's actually presenting at the time, but you're also welcome to put an X in the chat if you want us to call on you and you want to say something out loud or comment or ask questions. And then we'll have something at the end for you to request the information or to send any additional comments or follow up. All right.
Sweet. So as we get started, I'm just going to real quick read aloud our learning outcomes for you all. So the first one is participants will understand the rationale for implementing an interview rubric that utilizes checkboxes instead of traditional numerical scale. Participants will understand how to develop checkboxes and ways to integrate them into their own process. So if we've done our job right, that's what you're going to walk away here today knowing.
So we wanted to start by opening up with a Jamboard. I don't know if anyone's used a Jamboard before, but I used it for NACUR. It was really neat. So you can use this QR code, and Hailee is going to put the link in the chat. And we just want to see what are some common issues you've seen with our interview or scoring processes. And so I'll give a second for that QR code, and Hailee put the link.
And then if you don't have access to the Jamboard, you can just put your post-it note in the chat as well, and I can add it on my end.
So this is what a Jamboard is. It's kind of like you could put your own sticky note. So, we started off with 2 comments already. Some people are nice graders, others are harsh graders. And people get tired, so the interviews later in the day have lower scores. I just think Jamboards are fun because you can pick different colors and move them all around. Bias is a big one. Yep, absolutely.
Higher expectations on students. We're definitely going to touch on that.
Yep, students of color are lower rated lower, implicit bias, consistency and expectations for sure. Interviewers putting an emphasis on different areas. I'm glad someone said that. We're definitely going to talk about that. Someone wrote a line through everything. Yes to everything. That's a checkbox I see. These stickies are so fun, right? International students receiving lower scores, also something we're going to talk a little bit about. Difficult to quantify a qualitative conversation. Absolutely. Introvert bias. Yes. Training student staff. Something we're really going to focus on in our presentation. And certainly we don't have all of the answers for these. By no means do we want to say that what we're doing is perfect. This is only in year 2 of our major overhaul, so lots and lots of room to grow from here as well. Only hiring students that fit the mold. Yes, kind of thinking about what are we looking for in terms of is it have to be an extroverted person, and what does extroversion mean? What does it look like? Awesome. So looks like there's a lot of things here, a lot of similarities. What does a 5 really mean? Ooh, I feel that to my core. So awesome. We're going to head back to the presentation. So taking some of the things that you've all seen, whoever is organizing this, kudos to you, because that is.
I love it. Yeah, I thought it was you, Kaila.
I thought it was you. Love that. Love that. Awesome. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about some of these things that we also, noticed, and some ways that we're trying to combat some of these things and some ideas we have to continue to move forward. So thank you all for that.
All right, so to give you kind of an idea on where Kaila and I started to identify the need on why we really wanted to overhaul this process, to give you an idea of what our process looks like, for the RA position only, we have anywhere between 800 to 1,000 started applications. We end up interviewing around 350 candidates. We offer that many slots. And then we have approximately 300 staff that help with our interviews as interviewers. And that does include 199 our 199 RAs, and we have a total staff of 199 RAs, which usually includes about 80 to 100 returners every year. So we hire anywhere between like 70 to 90 new RAs every single year, starting from that 800 to 1,000 application pool. So we start from really big and go pretty small. So our scores, traditionally the 1 to 5 scale score is not being utilized in selection. And this can be between discrepancies between staff members. We heard a lot that staff would be, oh, I don't really look at Kaila's scores because she's super, super easy. I know her 5 is basically my 1. So I never really care about her score, but Hailee's like the hardest grader I've ever met. My 5 is her 1. So I just don't even look at scores. I just look at the notes, and that's how I select it. And if you look at our numbers going through with even just looking at the 350 that we interview, looking through every single notes on each candidate is very time consuming. And we really see that our job is being tasked with making this process as easy as possible for our professional staff members. So if it's this difficult, then that's not really us doing our job as effectively. Yes, that is a lot of interviews. We do have a staff around 40 to 50 just within Res Life. And so they really help. And then we have previously used our RAs, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. These numbers for this year, we had about 800 started applications. It was on the lower end. And we did give out 350 interviews still. So we need more consistent scoring. That was a huge barrier we kept seeing, is like I talked about, the 1 to 5 scale, it could be anyone's 1 to 5. It really isn't consistent. So we needed some sort of consistent scoring to be able to help our staff know that they can score and look at the scores and help that better their selection. Our staff specifically said they didn't look or utilize these scores. And then another big part of us wanting to overhaul our previous system was we wanted to mitigate bias. We know that it's impossible to mitigate bias completely, but we also know that that played a factor. And so we wanted to find out the best ways to make that no longer a factor and making our process as unbiased as possible.
So with all this in mind, as Hailee mentioned, we just heard that people weren't using the scores. And we know nobody can read 350 interviews. So we knew that people were hiring those that they interviewed, or those that were on their area council, or those they happen to know from various things. And that essentially defeats the whole purpose of an interview process, right? We want to make an interview process so candidates can complete the process, and then we hire those who do well in our process. And then we hire those who hopefully will do well in the job. So we revamped our entire interview process from start to scratch. And the way we did that was we focused on the job description and kind of worked with the end goal in mind. So when we hire people, what do we want them to be able to do? What are the skills that our resident assistants, and we're specifically talking about the resident assistant process here, what are the skills our resident assistants need? What are the competencies they need to have in order for us to help train them to be ready to do the job? So we worked backwards to create questions based off what would be a good answer. So thinking about the different types of skills our students would need to be successful in the job, being mindful that we will give them extensive training and they don't need to know all the right answers. But we kind of created in our mind what a good answer would be for someone who's ready to be trained, like an average answer. From there, we created a question. Once we create those questions, we would go through multiple different ways we thought candidates could answer the question and what we felt was a good enough answer. From there, Hailee will talk about how we made the checkboxes based on that question that we developed. And one of the biggest things and the biggest skills we found we were trying to assess and we never quite hit it was critical thinking. these are some students who have never had a job before. They may not have really great answers on times they've displayed critical thinking. They may have it, but not know how to articulate it. And even if they do think they are great at critical thinking, they, excuse me, they may say it, but not really mean it. So how do we actually assess critical thinking? That was one of the things we found was a core component to be successful. We can train you on literally everything else, policies, how to document situations, how to have intentional conversations, but we need you to have critical thinking skills at least started. So we created a bunch of scenario questions to allow them to demonstrate how they might work through a situation, not really related to how they would solve something that they need training and development for, but just purely how would they as a person right now work through that type of situation. And those have been really helpful for us in our process.
All right, so like Kaila said, I'm going to walk you all through. Once we created our question, like she said, we have the overall idea, then we write the question that we think is going to get that idea. Then we create our checkboxes. So the checkboxes are used to denote specific parts of the candidate's answer. And we really strategically made it to where checkboxes build off of each other. So checkbox 1 should be your very basic level answer. So we included an example of a real question that we used during our RA interview. I'll read it aloud. RAs have a unique, multifaceted role on campus. What qualities or skills would you bring to the RA position? What are some skills you would like to develop through the RA position to help you become a better leader? So checkbox 1, the very basic level answer, would be answering that first question. Stated 2 or more qualities or skills they bring to the position, because that's what we asked first. And so that should be your basic answer. If they answered only that and then finished the question, they missed out, on the other stuff, but basic level answer. Checkboxes 2 and 3, these should be the ideal answers we would hope from a candidate. These are, they really listened, they probably used some critical thinking to ensure that they answered the full question, especially for a multifaceted question like this. This means that they, for the second checkbox, stated 2 or more skills they would like to develop in the position, which is that second question. And then the third checkbox is discussed how the position might help them in the future, which is tying in what skills you want to develop to help you become a better leader. So if they just stated skills that they want to develop, but they didn't tie it into how that's going to help them progress on and be a better leader in life, then they wouldn't get that third checkbox. And so finally, the fourth checkbox, this is the checkbox that's really going to separate those who display a higher skill set or stronger understanding of the topic or skills. This is often used when examples were given or answers are related back to the RA position. For example, this number 4 question, the fourth checkbox related at least one example back to the RA position. So we didn't specifically ask in question 4, give us an example or how would you do this in the RA position or anything like that. But a candidate who's going above and beyond, going that extra mile, would loop it in. And so we really are very specific on the words that we use, such as doing stated versus explained versus discussed. Stated means just laying it out. Discussed, talked about it, explained, gave a definition. So we're really specific on the words that we start the checkboxes with. As we move on to the next slide, make sure you look over this question one more time, as we're going to be using it on our next slide and it's not written over there.
I see the comment in the chat, and just to clarify, this is just one of our questions. We have about, I think, 9 or 10 questions throughout the entire interview. This is just a snapshot of one of our questions. And the reason we created that fourth checkbox, just to kind of elicit a little bit more about that, is we had, 200 good candidates. How do you pick the top 80 when they're all good? Like they're all doing well. So we wanted to find something that helped some candidates rise to the top, and that's where we created that fourth one. So when I started in 2017, something that was really important was to start training our staff. Wanted to really focus on getting our staff to be on the same page with interviews. Now, back in 2017, we were still using the traditional 1 to 5 scoring. So we would do scenario-based like case studies, which Hailee is going to walk you through now, how we do it for our checkboxes. But we started doing it even when we had the 1 through 5 scoring, so that we would have people review the question, come up with their answers, and talk about how to get to a consistent space where that 3 is your average and you're moving up and you're moving down based on like their overall response. So this is just a snapshot of some of that training.
All right, so keeping in mind the question that we just read on the previous slide, I'm going to read it aloud, is an answer that we created that an RA is going to give during an interview, or an RA candidate, I should say. As I read it aloud, please, listen and think about it, and then also look at those 4 checkboxes at the bottom again. They're the same checkboxes from the last slide, but definitely familiarize yourself with them. So I'm going to go ahead and read this answer aloud. I believe I would bring customer service and responsibility skills to the RA team. When I worked at McDonald's in high school, I worked at the cash register, and I learned how to interact with customers and how to be responsible to my coworkers by showing up on time and always doing my best. Sometimes when my coworkers didn't finish their tasks, I would help them so everyone could be done on time. I'd like to improve on my ability to hold others accountable. I think that I'll be able to learn how to do this as an RA because I feel confident in the policies and have other RAs there to help me if needed. As a business major, I know I'll be able to hold people accountable when I own my own company. So this skill will be very helpful for me to work on. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to put a poll. You should see it in front of your screen right now. And so this is for the first checkbox. Did they check off box 1, which says stated 2 or more qualities or skills they would bring to the position? So I'll give just a couple seconds. Alrighty, it's slowing down, and I've got the majority of you voting. So the majority of you all were right. This does hit 2 or more qualities or skills you would bring to the position. So we're going to go ahead and show you where on here. All right, so the first checkbox is hit because they said that they would bring customer service and responsibility skills. And so now we're going to talk about that second checkbox. So the second checkbox is stated 2 or more skills they would like to develop in the position. You should see that poll on your screen now. Go ahead and same thing, go ahead and vote if it is yes or no. This is already a lot closer than the first one.
Yeah, I've never seen the back end of the polls. This is kind of neat to see the answers coming in. Ooh, this is fun.
All right, it's still kind of close, and about half of you have voted, so we'll wait just a little bit more to see if we can get a kind of definite winner. All right, it's looking like the voting's slowing down again. So this one was really close. 66% of you said no, 34% of you said yes. And so the answer is no, it did not hit this poll. And this is why. So stated 2 or more qualities or skills they would like to develop in the position. They only listed 1. So they only stated that they would like to improve their ability to hold others accountable. So you would not be giving this candidate that second checkbox. All right, so the third checkbox is discussed how the position might help them in the future. You should see that poll now. All right, once again, it looks like the voting is slowing down. This one was pretty clear. 98% of you all selected yes, and that is the correct answer. They stated that as a business, sorry, the poll's in my way. As a business major, I know I will need to be able to hold people accountable when I own my own company. So this skill will be very helpful for me to work on. So yes, they did touch on that third checkbox. And finally, the fourth checkbox. The fourth checkbox is related at least one example to the RA position. You should see that poll on your screen now. Go ahead and let me know if you think that you would check that box off or no. All right, and once again, it looks like we are slowing down. This one was 89% yes, 11% no. And the result is that, yes, they did hit it when they said, I will be able to learn how to do this as an RA because I will feel confident in the policies and have other RAs to help me if needed. So they related it back to the RA position. And I see in the chat that a couple people talked about the multifaceted questions. We did keep this in mind, and we're going to touch on it in just a little bit. We do provide them with the questions, but I know Kaila is going to hit on that in a little bit. Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to keep up in the chat. We're going to go over how we give our questions to our students during the interviews in just a moment.
Are you good on explaining the rest of that one, Hailee?
Yeah.
Awesome. So as important it is for them to understand the tangible pieces of the checkbox system and interviewing and trying to be consistent with scores, the other part of our training is a whole presentation about minimizing bias. We definitely understand we will never get away from complete bias being removed from the process. We know that. Unconscious and conscious bias, it exists. But the more we can name it and call it out and have people start thinking about it, it's our hope that that at least helps move us forward a little bit. And so typically we try to get a presenter to come in and present this minimizing bias presentation. So this is just a snapshot of the things that we really try to emphasize with our staff regarding minimizing bias, specifically about the interview process. One thing I didn't note was that this presentation, so what Hailee just walked you through, the minimizing bias presentation, we do this for all of our professional staff. So we do have about 40 to 50 Res Life professional staff, and then we have additional staff within the unit, maybe our HR team or our assignments team who are interested in helping also participate. We train all of our professional staff through this type of presentation. Then we make the exact same presentation for our professional staff to deliver to their RAs during their team meetings. In various years, we've been able to have some of our committee members go to help facilitate that. So that's kind of the way we reach more people with our training. So just to go over this a little bit, we start by saying that interviewers should conduct interviews with a non-judgmental approach, which it is easy to say, but what does that mean? So some of the other ways we do some tangible things are asking questions the same way for every participant. So as Hailee is mentioning, and I kind of put in the chat, this is actually a picture of our, what was this, 2019 interview tables we just took for memory's sake. And then this year, since we were all virtual, we made them our backgrounds because we missed being in person. But as you can see here on the table, where my hand is what the candidates receive. And then where my hand is now is where the interviewers sit so that they have their notes. And then the candidates get the printout of all of the questions. And so we've always done that since I started here in 2017, printed out the questions. This year, when we did our interviews via Zoom, we had a PowerPoint with the questions. And we this year worked with our accessibility services department to ensure we had the right coloring on our PowerPoint to make it something that was accessible to all of our candidates utilizing it. And we also have a question in our eResLife profile that asks if they need any additional accommodations or any accommodations during the interview process. So we'll email each of those people individually and ask what accommodations we can provide if they need us to email them the questions ahead of time or anything like that. But with the printout questions and the ones that we had on Zoom, we feel like it's really important because we do ask multifaceted questions, and I start talking and forget what I'm saying normally, let alone in an interview process. I saw people saying, yeah, and full-time professionals struggle with this. There is no way we can expect our students who may be in their first interview ever to answer a 3-part question. But we like to build our questions with a lead-in that kind of explains it and then have 1 to 2 parts after it, which makes it lengthy. So part of our introductory speech is saying to the candidates, these questions are multifaceted. Here on the table, on the screen, we provide you the questions. We really encourage you to read it after we ask it to you. And then once you finish answering, reread that question to ensure you've answered all parts. One thing we noticed was people were asking questions different ways. So what are some of your strengths? Or how would you limit 2 skills, right? Those are very different than tell us about your strengths. And how Hailee and I read a question may be different. And then some candidates may say, did I answer that question well? Like, did I hit all parts? And for someone to say, oh, no, you didn't hit the second part, or no, you missed this part. So we instruct our staff, if they ask to repeat the question, or they ask they missed a part, restate the whole question the same way you restated it the first time. And so that way we try our best to have an equitable way that we're delivering the questions. Obviously, people talk differently, but our goal is for them not to restate or kind of say anything else separately or even describe or explain any parts of the question. Limiting the influence on participants via verbal and nonverbal cues. So Hailee and I joke all the time. The example she gave before is very true. I used to be guilty of being that person who's like, oh, fives, oh, so great, so great. And Hailee would be the person that was like, 1.
This was garbage.
No, I'm like, well, they could use training. So in terms of verbal and nonverbal cues, it's the same. I'm typically a person, I mean, you probably see me here, I'm like always nodding, always smiling. But if somebody says something that's totally off base, it is very hard for me to not go, and make it obvious that they just maybe messed up. And that can be off-putting. And so we try to tell all of our staff to try to keep their face standard, whatever their standard is, try to keep it, try not to make any facial reactions, not saying things like, oh, yes, I really love that answer, or, oh, I was a part of dance marathon undergrad too, that's so fun, as well as verbal cues like that. And so it's something important that we try to stress because it is definitely tough to manage that sometimes. So we even have them try to talk to their neighbor during this part of the presentation if we can, and try to keep their face standard and see what it looks like, because you may not know what your face looks like. I mean, we all talk about the fix your face type thing. And some people, your face is what it is. And so we talk to them about seeing it on screen and all of those things. Also writing only factual notes from the interview. One of the great things about the checkboxes that we've seen is people are so focused on the content now because they really are listening for, did they hit that checkbox? Did they list 2 qualities? Did they relate to the RA position? That they're focusing on writing as verbatim as possible the notes. That way at the end, they can go back and review with their partner, which is another thing that we try to require our staff to do, is to go back to ensure that they maybe didn't miss one of the things that was said. And so because they're focusing on that, they're less likely to say, seems like they would like to work with people, or was really nice and fun. And we also say that that should be taken to our overall strengths and our overall areas of improvement at the bottom of our form, where we tell them in the overall areas of improvement, overall strengths, relate it back, quote things that they said. In question 7, they listed X, Y, or Z. These are great strengths that show their diversity skills. For areas of improvement, stated something concerning in question 4, or didn't provide examples for any question. So that's the way we try to get to that overall notes section, because this year I have been a coordinator through this process in terms of hiring a staff. And I know that when I'm looking at 300 plus candidates, I'm really looking at that overall notes column as my place to start determining and narrowing down candidates. And as we talked about a little bit before too, focusing on content, not appearance. We do have a very high population of international students that work for our department, and trying to figure out how to train our staff to ensure that they're listening to what's being said, and taking notes on the content, not how it's being said. We don't want to see microaggressions come across in our notes. So we call those out, we explain those, we talk about listening for the content. We also talk about the fact that it doesn't matter what they're wearing. I went to a presentation earlier that talked about this as well, but we do this for our student staff. So 2 years ago when Hailee started, one thing we did was take out the dress code component. I am someone who, if you put me in a suit, I am going to be like feeling like, oh, I'm stuffy. If I wear a high heel, if I wear one high heel, that would be embarrassing. But if I wear high heels, probably going to fall on my face. Whereas Hailee is a goddess. She's beautiful and can rock a power suit and feel super comfortable. But some of our students may not have a suit. And we used to share a resource of where they could get a suit for free for their interview. But if that's their first time wearing a suit, they're probably going to be like, right? They're not feeling comfortable. And just like we provide the questions, our goal isn't to trick anyone. It's not to be like, gotcha, you didn't know the answer, right? Our goal is for them to be as comfortable and confident as possible in the process. And we talk about this through our informational session that's required as well, that we want them to be their best selves. We want to try to help them kind of be ready for the interview. Some things that we do to prep them for the interview helps with that. But really, what they wear has no bearing on their job. Also, I don't know about many of you, but none of our RAs ever wear a suit to duty or to do a roommate mediation. So we don't think they need to wear a suit to prove their ability to do the job. So we instituted a UCF spirit for ours, and they can wear a suit. If they want to wear business casual and they want to rock it, power to them, awesome. And if they just want to wear that cool UCF shirt and jeans, great. So that's something that we think has helped in terms of seeing them feel a bit more comfortable. And we ask them on their feedback at the end, and they really have appreciated that. And then this last piece is understanding that this may be the first interview for many. So leadership experience varies. Something that we have done this year is we actually removed our RAs from the process. Now, we did it as a test run this year. We weren't sure if we could ever get away from it because we do 350 interviews, right? So we need help. It used to be a pro staff and an RA. As the managers of the process, I can tell you the most complicated part of the process was managing 199 RAs, interview schedules and signups and last minute cancellations, but also reviewing their notes. There was such a big discrepancy. RAs were really harsh. They were thinking this person needs to be my duty partner tomorrow. This person's going to be on a program with me next week. And that obviously is not the case. Whereas our professional staff understand training a little bit better. And understand where a person may start and how you can kind of cultivate potential in somebody and train them to do all of the things we need them to do. So this year we did take all of our student staff out of the process and just interviewed with professional staff. We're going to show you a little bit what the results were for that. But we did see that it helped our professional staff be able to see more candidates and participate more and be more comfortable in the process. And also, to be honest, made it a little bit less complicated on the process for our end of scheduling everybody. But yeah, I definitely haven't been keeping up with the chat. Hailee, are there things
there was one thing I did want to address in the chat. Our interviews have not been recorded just because we didn't want the candidates to have to sign like a FERPA waiver or anything like that. So we didn't record our interviews this year. But with the Matthew asking the STAR interview model, we do present an RA information session. And so usually in a normal year, it would be in person. We'd offer 5 or 6 throughout the kind of fall semester leading up to the application deadline. And it is a requirement for anyone to apply to go to our information session. Now, COVID year, we filmed one and we posted it live on our Facebook, our YouTube, our website, basically anywhere that anyone could find UCF RA, they could find the informational video. And instead we asked in our application some questions like regarding the information video, like what is the example Hailee used as the fun item, like show and tell item that she brought. So different things that are like really hidden through the video that would make sure that they watched it all the way through. And they can look at the questions before they watch the video so they can know what to listen to. And while doing that informational video, we do touch on the STAR interview model. So we do really go through not only that tip, but a lot of interview tips, especially this year we talked about virtual interview tips, but we really honed in on that STAR interview model, trying to give people kind of that leg up in understanding that creating an example, bringing it back to the RA position was really going to be what goes kind of above and beyond.
One thing I'm trying to scroll back in the chat too. One thing I noticed that someone mentioned, and I did want to emphasize, is that we also create a script that our people read. As you can see, they have like this tiny paper and then their papers here. That's a breakdown of our living learning communities. And so that it tells them exactly what to say when, and it is a quoted, read this verbatim, and it includes, you know, we'll have 8 questions, we'll be taking notes. At the end of the time that you finish speaking, we'll still be taking notes. Feel free to reread the question to make sure you hit it. We acknowledge there may be some silence, but that's, I'm kind of pulling out of the air, but I'm pretty sure it says something like, I've read it this many times, I should memorize it, but it says something along the lines of, we're taking notes so the rest of our colleagues can really see the content you provide in your interview when they're making their selection process. And then we have it all the way down. We say, we're at the end, now it's your turn. Here's where we're gonna go. And then we also have a closing script with our timeline and the way to communicate back to myself and Hailee with our email address.
And Matthew, you asked, has it ever come up that a tire adjustment, not a representation of preparing them for life after college? Just curious. That's a great question. For the RA returner process, that's when we really focus on life after college. So part of the RA returner process is they have to complete a resume and they have to go to career services and have career services look at their resume. We talk about interviewing after college, things like that. So not so much in this interview round of bringing in new RA candidates, but our returning process does focus on life after college. And then there also were a couple questions about the RA's feelings about not being a part of the process. Did receive any pushback from student staff about being removed from the process? No, they were very excited about it. Unfortunately, our process has landed on homecoming a couple times throughout the years. So knowing that that didn't need to be a conflict, they were excited about. There have been a couple that reached out that they, you know, like enjoy being part of the process, and not this year because of the virtual component, but last year we were able to put them kind of on like our back behind the curtains committee kind of thing. So yes, so instead of being one of the interviewers, they really helped us processing the data, looking, putting that on the computer and doing a bunch of like kind of the background work if they're really interested on kind of what you don't see on the interview hiring side. So we did not receive any pushback from not being part of interviews this year. That was not a problem.
We also do our interview process in October. So we didn't have much time to kind of quickly turn around everything because our application goes live in July, which means our info session that explains pretty much verbatim what our interview is going to be like had to launch in July. And I don't know what you all were doing in July, but we definitely had no idea what things were going to look like. But we do want to create a committee of those RAs who are interested in helping interview. We want to train them and we want to let them help with the interview process. So it's more of an opt-in versus you will work as an RA, you must do 6 interviews type thing. So I want to jump to the next slide just real quickly, and then I know we can go back, but I also want to say we did remove the resume as a requirement from our new hire RA application. Some informal feedback I received back when I first started here was that there was candidates who weren't applying because they didn't have a resume. And then also candidates that were applying with the resume that said my name and I babysat. Really didn't do anything for me. I wasn't hiring them based on their resume. They didn't have experience. Again, it doesn't mean that they can't be a good RA. And we didn't quite have an opportunity to work with our career center to figure out how to do that in a way that would be productive for them. And so it wasn't being used and it seemed to have a negative effect. So we did take it out. Something that we might consider bringing back potentially if we can find a way for it to be useful, but we did take it out for our new people.
Yeah, we've been going without the resume for a few years now. We just saw that some people would just put on, you know, like babysat. And like, that's okay if that's all they've ever done before this job. And so this job doesn't really require a lot of experience. We can do most of the training needed. So that's another component that went into why we kind of got rid of the resume aspect of it. So to review our implementation.
Hailee, I got the chat. You can talk about
Okay, yeah. Okay, so review implementation. So we did really want to look at if what our big overhaul that we did almost 2 years ago, if it really made a difference. So we looked at some data about the discrepancies in our scores. So this is analysis of the average score discrepancies for individual interviews. In 2016, the average score discrepancy was 4.9, so almost 5 points different between each interviewers. There's 2 interviewers for 1 candidate, and the scores are almost 5 points difference off on average. And so in 2017, that's when Kaila joined the department, and she implemented our staff training that we kind of touched on, and that drastically dropped. That discrepancy dropped down to 3.6. And then in 2018, again, another drop down to 3.2. I joined the department in 2019, and that's when we implemented our checkbox system, and that went from a score discrepancy of 3.2 down to 2.2. And then this year, when we did not utilize RAs and we used the checkboxes, this year's score discrepancy was 1.9. So on average, there was only almost 2 points off per set of interviewers. So a huge drop from 5 years ago, from 4.9 to 1.9. So we're really proud of the overhaul. And it's great to see that this big change really did have a significant difference, and hopefully we're benefiting our candidates more by doing so, and our pro staff. So we also have, with additional information, the interviewer overall recommendation. So at the very end of the interview, we give the interviewer an option on their score sheet to put in strongly recommend, reservations, or do not hire. So this allows for the interviewer to have some discretion. For example, if a candidate answers all the questions, amazing, and they hit all the check boxes, but maybe during their interview they say something problematic, concerning, or inappropriate, having that option at the end for the interviewer to put in strongly recommend reservations, or do not hire gives us kind of a little red flag if there's a do not hire, but an amazing score to really look at that candidate, look at some of the things that were said, and decide if that candidate, even with the high score, would be a good fit for our position. In addition, we do utilize eResLife. We are huge eResLife fans. We are like president and co-president for their fan page. If they have one, I'm sure we'll make one. So we love eResLife. They have made this whole thing possible and have been on call for us throughout these last 2 to 3 years of implementing this. And so we do see that there is a big difference between introverts doing best on application and extroverts doing better in interviews. So the final score that we send out to our pro staff, this is their overall score. We do take both their interview score and application score and give them an overall score. That way, nothing is weighted more than the other. If they do better in writing to articulate their ideas, that's going to show heavier with a better score on their application. And same if they do better talking out loud, can talk out loud and like really get through their thoughts, that's going to show better in their interview, and they're going to get an overall score that takes the average of those two.
Yeah, and I tried to hit a little bit in there, but the same way we do this checkbox system for the interview, we also do it for the applications. And so Hailee, myself, and about 3 to 5 of our committee members, we specifically train on the application rubric. Again, a very similar checkboxes. Did they hit this? 1, 2, 3, 4. They get their scores. The overall recommendations from each of their references are scores as part of it. And that is our overall score. And that's how we determine who to go from the like 800 down to the 300 who are going to get interviews. So like I think this year we use a 70 or 75% was how we determine who was moving on from the interviews. And so just some quick staff feedback. We were really excited to see that data. That was something that Hailee and I were very curious about, but just had it pulled for a while. So when she pulled it recently, it was awesome to see that. We also asked some of our staff informally and formally for some feedback. So you'll see some quotes here, but really the highlights and themes is it was easier to write notes because then they could then go back and select checkboxes. Took the guessing out of scoring, more consistency between interviewers. What I'm most proud of is that it helped during the selection process because scores should be more accurate. Because as Hailee mentioned in the beginning, our goal as the selection leadership, or the selection leadership, we're only talking about selection, as the staff selection process managers, is to make it something that candidates feel comfortable in, right? We want to attract great candidates, but equally as important, our staff, it should be easy for them to review applications and determine who they're selecting. Our job is to make it easy. We're like the middle people. So seeing their input and seeing that Previously they didn't think the score presented the candidate, but with the checkboxes for the application interviews, they know they're accurate. And we do hope that we've made a lot of changes all at once. And so it's interesting to kind of see how they work together, but our staff really like it. We've actually been asked to expand it to all of our student staff positions. And so we moved it to our office assistants, another area in our office that oversees our conference assistants. They look to integrate it. And we're working on connecting with our mail services and our housing ambassadors to find ways to have this kind of department wide with the checkboxes. And for our grad process, and maybe one day something like this for our professional staff, but one step at a time. So I know we only have a few minutes left. I just want to very briefly touch on, we took this same approach into our RA evaluation. So the RA evaluation hadn't been updated since we started our residential curriculum. So it was in need of some TLC, but it was one of those things that kept getting put in the back burner, but it was part of our committee's responsibility. So after seeing a success in 2018 to 2019, yeah, 2018, 2019, 2019, 20, whatever year 2 years ago was, we saw there was a success with that consistency among staff. And another area we saw inconsistency was staff evaluations. So an RA that worked in A community would move to B community for the fall or for the summer, think that they're a stellar candidate because they always have 5s. And then when they get feedback from their new supervisor, they're like, but my evaluation was always 5s. Like, I don't understand, or vice versa. So we try to find a way to kind of pull in the check boxes, so to speak. And so this is just a snapshot of one small section. The way we did our RA evaluations is we determined what competencies our RAs need to be successful in their job, similar to how we did that for the RA interview process. And then the sections of those are our competencies. So community management is a competency. Here are some of our questions. This is the very first year we did this, back in fall of 2020 or spring of 2020, maybe was the first time we launched it. So we're still new in this, but every supervisor completes the same form. They see exactly what an unsatisfactory 1, unsatisfactory 2, exemplary 3. We still have the numbers, so we can get a numerical overview, because this helps us move towards our rehire process. So if you get a certain score, you'll get a conditionally eligible for rehire versus an eligible for rehire, to help us when we're making our rehire decisions. So we're not just being like, we like you, come back, or we don't like you, don't come back. So this is just a way to show you this evaluation, even though it is a short snapshot. There's also feedback sections in here as well as overall commentary. But I know there's a bunch of questions in there, and Hailee will talk about our materials, and then I'll try to go back to the chat while she's telling you that.
Yes, so I was in the middle of typing one, but I will finish answering that question in a moment. But if you want to request any of our materials, we do have a QR code on the screen. I'll also, you can type in that tiny URL as well, and it just takes you to an easy Qualtrics form, letting us know what you'd like and what you'd like a copy of, and we'll go ahead and email all of that out after SEAHO gets kind of wrapped up. And so that way you're not inundated with the materials you're not really interested in, but you can select all the materials that you do really want. Of course, you can email me and Kaila any questions that you may have. Our emails are on the screen. We also both jointly manage the Res Life Selection at ucf.edu email. So if you just want to send one email to both of us to get our attention, you can send it there as well, because we run that all about selection. And obviously, this presentation is about selection. So yeah, please feel free to ask us any questions. We'd love to share our material. We are diehard checkbox fans, and we want the world to run on checkbox at this point. So whatever we can do to share this, we'd love to.
And our committee, briefly, as someone asked about the committee, our committee is chaired by myself and Hailee, co-chaired by us. And then we have 1 to 2 full-time coordinators, and then 2 to 3 graduate leaders. So anywhere from 3 to 5 professional staff. We are looking to hopefully expand to have some student staff, like we said, but for right now, it's just our professional staff. We try to squeeze as much in as possible in a really short time, and we're still learning. So if you have suggestions or ideas of things that we presented, we would also love to hear this. And literally all of our materials, we're happy to share and talk more. We tried to figure out how to create like a channel where we can all connect later and talk about this, but Hailee and I couldn't come to any conclusion, but we're always looking to chat with other selection people so we can help make our process better.
We did see a decline in our applications. I just saw that we were actually able just to push back the deadline a little bit, and we kind of went back to the same number of applicants we get in a normal year. So we did have to do a bigger push on marketing and social media, but we did end up getting kind of the lower end of our average, but still within our average number of applicants.
And I will say, about a week out from the deadline, Hailee and I were crying because we had like a fifth of our normal numbers. And so we definitely felt that.